We're talking about last time concerning people charging God with indecency for not gifting a longer life, and which is a kind of a nice way of saying that after say 30 years of life, as Jesus' parable says, tonight your life will be demanded of you. And so at some point, our life shall be demanded of us, and we must give an account. Now, with that said, there are those who uncharitably will charge God with this indecency. And interestingly enough, many of these same people who would charge God with doing something like this are the same people who have no qualms about snuffing out children in their mother's wombs. Try to wrap your head around that. I certainly couldn't, reflecting on it earlier, that one would charge God with such malice and disrespect for life. These same people who would not even blush at the idea of ripping a child limb from the mother's womb. But God is mean by only granting a certain amount of time for someone, or at any point in time demanding our life to be returned, the gift which He has given. Trent Horn used the expression of taking matters into our own hands, or playing God was the expression he used. And I find it just ironic. It's I think ultimately what it comes down to is some people just want to do whatever it is that they want to do. And the attacks, really, these criticisms of God in the Old Testament, I think, has more to do with their discontent against life and the notion of God. To bring this down to our own concerns, there's this scene in the movie Luther where Luther, during a time of prayer, his spiritual father overhears him praying and comes into the room, and Luther's distraught. And he's saying, I need a God that I can love. I need a God of mercy, not a God who is always angry with me, threatening me with the fires of hell, something to that effect. And while it is certainly true that God's holiness would leave us undone for sure, as Isaiah said, he said, I am undone. God is incredibly holy, and I mean, it's just, I think there's a certain respect and fear that goes into that. But coming to understand God, not just as a holy God who keeps to himself, but a God who wants to share his holiness with us. And takes a very merciful and compassionate approach to kind of crouch down into our sinfulness and try to draw us up out of it to share in His holiness. That certainly is a God that we can come to love, you know. I mean, in the Old Testament, we see all kinds of depictions of God judging sinfulness being seen for all that it is, and seeing in God's response to it His own holiness. Because ultimately, sin is not just simple mistakes. Sin is something that is incredibly offensive, something that is spiritually bad for us, and greatly wounds our relationship with God. And God is rightly, to use a kind of an anthropomorphic kind of term, but God is angry, because the thing is it is fitting for us to love Him who is all loving. And so yes, we need a God that we can love. But I think when people make these charges against God by pointing to some of these Old Testament moments, they're not doing it because they want to understand God. I think they're doing it simply because they don't really want to have anything to do with God. They just want to critique the notion of God that other people might have, you know, all the while playing God in their own life. It is interesting, though, how easily, and to be fair, how easily we can slip into replacing the role of God in our life with something else. How easily we can do that. Alright, I'm not immune to that. I have my own weaknesses, my own temptations. And I pray that God would truly give us a glimpse into just how miserable those things are that we replace Him with. And in the light of choosing them instead of God, just how ridiculous that is if you apply any amount of reason to it. Anyways.